In this video, we're going to complete example 5. We're going to factorize the following non-monic quadratics. So in an earlier lesson, we learned how to factorize monic quadratics, and monic quadratics did not have a number to the left of the x squared or the a squared or whichever pronumeral it was. This time we do have a number. For question A, we've got a 2 to the left of x squared, and for question B, we've got the number 3 to the left of x squared. To factorize these is quite a long and arduous activity. So I'm going to break it down into steps. Let's go with step 1. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply the, let's call them the outside numbers. All right, so let's see what I mean by that in question A. The outside numbers are the 2 on the far left and the -3 to the far right. Very important that we take note of that minus sign there. So let's multiply them and see what we get. So step 1, 2 times -3 gives us -6. All right, next we've got step 2, and what we'll say is that we are looking for 2 special numbers. We'll just call them special numbers. I don't really know what to call them, to be honest. Now these 2 special numbers need to multiply to make -6, and they need to add to make -5. And if you're wondering where I took those 2 numbers from, the -6 is what I got as a result of step 1, and the -5 comes from the middle term. So what 2 numbers multiply to make -6 and add to make -5? Well, the 2 numbers are -6 and +1. -6 plus 1 is -5, and -6 times +1 makes -6. And these are what I am calling my special numbers. Okay, like I said, I don't really know what else to call them. That now takes us to step 3. And for step 3, we're going to split our middle term in 2. And I'll show you what that means over in question A. So looking at my original expression, 2x squared minus 5x minus 3, the first term is going to stay the same, and the last term, the -3, is going to stay the same as well. The middle term will be split in 2. To do this, I'm going to look at my 2 special numbers, my -6 and my +1. And I'm going to write down -6x plus 1x. We can see that I got these 2 numbers from my special numbers. Now if you look closely, I haven't actually changed the expression, because -6x plus 1x is the same as -5x. So I've got the exact same expression, I've just split the middle term in 2. Now I come to my 4th and final step, and for this step we're going to factorize by grouping. Okay, so we're going to group this expression into 2 parts. 2x squared minus 6x and 1x minus 3. So let's factorize the first part here. Looking at the 2 and the 6, I've got a highest common factor of 2. So I'm going to factor out the 2. And I've got x squared and x, so I'm going to factor out an x as well. And then I'm going to have a set of brackets, and I think to myself, 2x times what gives me 2x squared? Well, that's going to be x. Then the minus sign. 2x times what will give me minus 6x? I need to put down a 3. Just to double check, 2x times x is 2x squared, and 2x times 3 gives me 6x, and then I put the minus sign in the middle. I really want to make sure that my second set of brackets is exactly the same. I want it to be x minus 3. And I can see that if I put a plus 1 here, that's going to work. 1 times x is 1x, and 1 times minus 3 is minus 3. Now, if you don't know how to factorize by grouping, which is what I just did, well, I actually covered that in a previous topic, and that's why I've gone through this a little quickly this time. Okay, now you might remember from that previous topic, if you've got two sets of brackets the same, you rewrite it in just one set of brackets, x minus 3, and then you take your two terms here, the 2x and the plus 1, and you put that in another set of brackets, 2x plus 1, like so. Now I know that this has taken quite a long time, but after taking these 4 steps that I've outlined, we've been able to factorize this expression. In fact, I just want to double check and make sure that it works. And the best way to do that is to expand this expression and see if it takes us back to what we originally had. Okay, I'll just do this quickly. 2x times x is 2x squared. I'll do it in green because the green represents me checking my answer. 2x times negative 3 gives me minus 6x. 1 times x is 1x or plus 1x. And finally, 1 times negative 3 is minus 3. And if I simplify that, I get 2x squared minus 5x minus 3. So that worked great. Anyway, I'm going to rub this part out in green. I'm just a bit worried that someone will look at that and get a bit confused by what they see. And we'll now move on to question B. We're going to follow the exact same 4 steps here. So we'll start with step 1. And we're going to multiply those outside numbers, the 3 and the positive 10. So what do you get when you multiply 3 by positive 10? Well, 3 times 10 is 30. Then moving on to step 2. And step 2 involves finding those 2 special numbers. And they have to multiply to make the number we got in step 1. So they've got to multiply to make 30 or positive 30. And they need to add to make that number in the middle term, the negative 17. So they've got to add to make negative 17. So what could those 2 numbers be? I reckon they're going to be negative 15 and negative 2. Because negative 15 added to negative 2 makes negative 17. And negative 15 times negative 2 makes positive 30. Now, in case you're wondering how I figured out those 2 numbers so quickly, well, for one thing, I've had a lot of practice doing this. And the other thing is, I always focus on the multiplication part first. I think to myself, what numbers multiply to make 30? Well, 5 times 6 makes 30, 15 times 2 makes 30. And in my head, while I was doing that, I thought, well, 15 times 2 sounds like the right 2 numbers because I can make 17 out of 15 and 2. So that's the kind of process that's going on in my head when I figure out those 2 special numbers. So right next to that, special numbers. Those are our special numbers here, negative 15 and negative 2. So we'll now go to step 3. And like I said, the 2 outside terms remain the same, the 3x squared and the plus 10. These 2 outside terms stay the same. The middle term is split in 2. So how do we split it? Well, we look at our special numbers, our minus 15 and our minus 2. So we write down here minus 15x minus 2x. This expression that we have in step 3 is exactly the same as the expression we had at the very beginning, because minus 15x minus 2x is the same as minus 17x. The only reason we split it in two is so that we can factorize by grouping. We cannot do step 4 unless we actually have 4 terms here. So we're on to step 4. And we're going to split this expression into two groups, 3x squared minus 15x. And the second group, we've got to include that minus sign. This is minus 2x plus 10. Very important that we don't ignore those minus signs there. All right, so what are we going to factor out in our first group here? Well, 3 fits into both 3 and 15, so I'm going to factor out my 3. And I also need to factor out an x. 3x times x will give me 3x squared. And then 3x times minus 5 will give me minus 15x. What am I going to factor out from the 2 and the 10? Well, 2 fits into both 2 and 10. And I've also got a minus sign here. So I'm going to write this as minus 2. And I'm really hoping that I get x minus 5 in my second set of brackets. Minus 2 times x gives me minus 2x. And minus 2 times minus 5, two minuses give me a positive. They will give me plus 10. And this has worked out great because both sets of brackets are exactly the same, which means I can take those two sets of brackets and put them in one set of brackets, x minus 5. And then I'm going to take my two terms, the 3x and the minus 2, and I'm going to write them here, 3x minus 2, like so. And I've been able to factorize this expression down below. Now, before we conclude this video, I want to point out a couple of really common mistakes that people make. And I want to do this so that you don't make those mistakes. Now, I don't really have much room here, so I'm going to make a bit of room. I'm going to rub out my 4 steps in green. So now's the time to copy that down. So let's call the first mistake, mistake 1. Quite often, people complete steps 1 and 2, but they forget to do steps 3 and 4. And the reason they do this is they look at their special numbers. So in the case of question B, the special numbers are negative 15 and negative 2. And then they write down a factorized expression like so, x minus 15, x minus 2. Now this method here is taken from the method used to factorize monic quadratics, quadratics that do not have a number to the left of the x squared. So you can see how easy it is for people to get mixed up between non-monic quadratics and monic quadratics. So that's the first mistake that I've seen. Mistake 2, and I'm only going to cover 2 mistakes. This mistake occurs when the expression has been written in a funny order. So take, for example, question B. What if it was written like so? 3x squared plus 10 minus 17x. Notice that they've swapped the last and middle term here. So when you follow the steps that I've mentioned, it's very important that you rewrite it in the proper order. You really want whichever term has the x next to it, or it could be an a or a b, or whatever pronumeral it is, that one needs to be in the middle. The term with the x squared needs to be at the beginning, and the constant term, the term with no x or no pronumeral, needs to be at the end. So it's very important that you rearrange it first. So for mistake 2, if I had that in front of me, I would rearrange it so that the minus 17x is in the middle and that the plus 10 is at the end before I start my 4 steps here. Now, I mentioned before that I was about to finish the video, and I've just thought of one more thing that I would like to mention, and it's something that some of you might have already thought about. When we were answering questions A and B, we split the middle terms, and for question A I wrote minus 6x plus 1x. And some of you may be wondering, what happens if I do this in a different order? What if I put the plus 1x first and the minus 6x second? The same with question B. What if I put the minus 2x first and the minus 15x next? Well, let's look at what happens. What I'll do is I'll just give myself some space. Let's look at question A. Let's redo step 3. Except this time, let's put the plus 1x first and the minus 6x second. What's going to happen when I get to step 4 and I factorize by grouping? And let's explore that. Okay, so let's factorize this first expression. We've got a 2 and a 1. So really the highest common factor is 1. And we've also got x squared and x. So I can only factor out just x. Let's see what happens. X times 2x will give us 2x squared. And x times 1 will give us 1x. What about our second group here? What's the highest common factor for 6 and 3? Well, it's going to be 3. So I'm going to put 3 down. I'm also going to put a minus here. Then my set of brackets. Minus 3 times 2x will give me minus 6x. Minus 3 times 2 is minus 6, and then my x. And minus 3 times 1 will give me minus 3. And then, for my last step, what I do is I take the 2 sets of brackets that are the same and I write them once. And then the other 2 terms, the x and the minus 3, and I write them in one set of brackets. And we can see that we actually get the same expression, the same factorized solution here. So it really doesn't matter the order in which you put these 2 middle terms. Anyway, that concludes our video on example 5. Remember to read the description below for links to work booklets that relate to this video.